the Happy Scientist podcast. Each episode is designed to make you more focused, more productive, and more satisfied in the lab. You can find us online at bitesizebio.com/happy scientist. Your hosts are Kenneth Vogt, founder of the executive coaching firm Vera Claritas, and Dr. Nick Oswald, PhD, bioscientist, and founder of Bitesize Bio.
Hello, this is not Nick Oswald welcoming you to this Bitesize Bio webinar, but Tom Warwick, content creator here at Bitesize Bio. Today we have a live episode of the Happy Scientist podcast. If you want to become a happier, healthier, and more productive scientist, you're in the right place. With me, as always, is the Bitesize Bio team's Mr. Miyagi, Mr. Kenneth Vogt. In these sessions, we hear from Ken mostly on principles that help shape you for a happier and more successful career. And along the way, I'll pitch in with points from my personal experience as a scientist and working with Ken. If you have any questions along the way, please put them into the questions box on the side of your screen and I'll put them to Ken. Today, we will be discussing what gets you up in the morning to do science, why knowing the reason matters. So Ken, over to you.
Right. Well, hey Tom, good to have you on the call with us again.
Yeah, I know it's good to be back. They're always fun. They're always lively.
Yeah, I was thinking about this question. What gets you up in the morning to do science? This is not a question for me. Most of the time, the question that's the header for this, I'm going to answer for you. But this is a question you have to answer for me. And I'm not saying this to Tom. I'm saying this to you, the listeners. Why do you get up in the morning? What are you doing this for? What happened? How'd you get here? There's plenty of people that didn't choose to do this, but you did, and you're doing it. So what the answer to that question is going to come from is getting some clarity on your own motivations. Where did it come from for you? And it's going to be a different answer for different people. And some of you may think some of these answers don't look like they're the best of intentions, but they are what they are. Others will think, well, they have a very high and mighty reason for doing what they do, and they might think others aren't as pure about it as they are. But you know what? We're solving multiple problems in any given moment, so don't be too hard on yourself. If your answer to this isn't perfection, you may have an answer that's perfectly fine, and the measure will be: does it keep you in the game? Does it keep you moving forward? Does it keep you engaged? And perhaps your motives get more and more pure over time.
It's interesting, Ken, because I thought you were going to spin that question back round at me, like you've done before. So I was thinking about this before coming on to the podcast. So I was thinking about what gets me up in the morning. Take the science out of it. Ask the broader question first. And well, practically speaking, people rely on me, right? Colleagues for my skills and experience, friends and family rely on me for support, and both of those are reciprocal. I'm grateful for my friends, my partner, my family, that they get up in the morning too because I need them, and ditto for my colleagues. And I guess you can take from that we're all part of something a little bit bigger than ourselves. I know it sounds cheesy, and for better or for worse, sometimes it can be a headache being embroiled with other people. So I think the idea of being involved with something bigger than yourself enables us to do what I think most people, especially scientists, would include among their reasons for getting up in the morning, and that is to make a positive contribution to society.
Sure.
None of us can do that alone, I don't think. But in science, this obviously sits side by side with the idea that our net contributions are perhaps very small. In science in particular, this can be painful because we rub alongside quite closely with people who can make quite big contributions in our field. And you don't get this in other sectors and other walks of life. For example, my friends aren't like great philanthropists or technical innovators or political animals who affect massive change. But in science in particular, it's not uncommon to have extremely eminent colleagues and colleagues of colleagues, and in whose shadow we perceive to sit. But to bring it back to the why, I think that's missing the point. I think the point is you can do whatever you want to make that net positive contribution if that's your that motivation for getting up and doing science.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to go to the next slide because I want to take this apart a bit, and I still want to ask you the question: Not just what gets you up in the morning, but gets you up to do science, you personally, because you're still engaged in science. But we'll come back to that.
Sure. Okay. I thought my answer would sate you because it was nice and broad, but fair enough.
So the question you can ask yourself, anyone can ask themselves, am I clear about this? Do I know why I'm doing what I'm doing? Why? Why are you engaged in science? And this is the rhetorical question to the audience. So here's a couple of things that may help you with this. Clarity is where it stops being, vague. It's like I have got a crystal clear picture of why I'm doing what I'm doing. What's the advantage of clarity? Well, first off, it helps you meet challenges, because the fact is, when you start getting into some things, it starts getting hard. In some cases, it may start to get murky. At least the data is murky. But that doesn't mean you're murky. You still know what you're about. You still know what you're after. That kind of clarity will help you keep going through those things. What about setbacks? Well, if you have setbacks, clarity again helps you overcome that, because again, you've got a notion of where I'm headed with this. I know why I'm doing it. I know what the outcome is I'm looking for. In the broad long-term picture of having clarity on why you're doing science, is it will guide your career. It's gonna help you with your professional growth. It's gonna point out to you areas that are weak, where you need to get support, or you need to get perhaps more training, or you need to get more skilled, or you need to make better connections. uh, Clarity will make all the difference for all of that stuff. So clarity is kind of a hot button issue for me personally. I really, really like to come looping back to that in anything we're talking about. I want to be clear in what I'm talking about, and I want you to be clear what I've been talking about. You don't always have to agree with me, but I want you to understand my point. um, and you can understand and go, yeah, I don't buy that. Fine, go there, but at least do it from a point of clarity, instead of it doesn't feel good, I don't like that answer. No, let's let's have some clarity on what's going on with this, because doing science specifically, it's hard. You know, I don't care what kind of scientist you are. It is not an easy job. Now, that may be for a lot of you the part of the appeal. You don't want to be working at the toll booth. You know, you do want to engage your brain. Yeah. So that's part of the upside. But having this clarity, you can say for yourself, well, which kind of clarity is most important to me? Do I need to be worried about my career? Do I need to be focused on challenges and and getting things done effectively? Do I need to be able to get over problems when they arise? You'll know for yourself. That's not to say you may not have all of these things going on, and it's great, because clarity is one of those beautiful one size fits all tools. If you can be clear about many things, everything else gets clear, and it becomes obvious to others too. You become somebody that others will rely on and can go to for advice and mentorship. um, and in your field, we need people like that, because not just anybody can do that. I cannot mentor you at the bench. I'm not a scientist. I can't do it. um, I just don't, I wouldn't know what to tell you. So having somebody like you out there that can do that for other people, it I mean, it's tremendously valuable. So I'll give you a moment to chime in there and opine if you'd like, Tom.
Yeah, well, I figured, you asked me about science in particular,
Mhm.
and it's easy for me to think I don't do science anymore now, but it's simply not true. This job is science adjacent. I work with scientists every day, and I still um, analyze data in a scientific way,
Mhm.
which brings me towards alternative careers for scientists, which I don't want to go into at this stage. So back to, why do I do science, and why did I choose to do science for a degree, for example? For a long time, it was I don't know. I wasn't clear on it. just like the abstract of the episode, the importance of knowing why it can be extremely helpful to stay happy in your chosen career path, but I just
Hmm.
wasn't. So during my graduate studies, that I don't know gradually morphed into, I like doing research, and it kind of went back and forth between those two vague viewpoints. And I think it's extremely normal for us to be ambivalent about why we do science. I think a lot of the audience will relate to that. But you just mentioned clarity. Towards the end of my graduate studies, I began to think about what sort of job I wanted, what I could see myself doing. And that obviously involves a bit of self-reflection.
Hmm.
And I came to the realization personally that I'm doing science now because I was good at passing exams, and good with numbers. I'd been on the course to this point, doing science for quite some time. So taking an honest assessment of how things were at the time, not many of my colleagues were my friends throughout the PhD and uni. That's not to say I didn't have friends, but for some reason, there was something within me that felt like I needed to keep the other scientists around me
Hmm.
at a distance. And I think that's because by the end of the day, I just had enough of science and scientists and the stuff they talk about. I cared enough to do my research and do a good job at it, but it never felt much more like a job,
Hmm.
whether I was studying or actually in a science job. Um, Incidentally, I think the emotional detachment can make you a better researcher, but
Hmm.
that's prone to being mistaken for not caring. But okay, so I cared a bit less about the work I was doing than my peers. That didn't undermine what I was doing, but it made me think about my longevity in academia. How far up the academic ladder could I realistically get?
Right.
Now, being a good problem solver and good with numbers, that makes me a great bench researcher. I was good at it, and I still would be good if I was back in the lab. But could I be a bench researcher forever? Well, you certainly can do. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that, and I know people
Hmm.
have. Practically, I think in the end you become a very experienced but expensive to employ postdoc. But I think I'd enjoy a career at the bench scientist if I found an interesting project, and B, I could have a permanent work contract. Now, academia couldn't offer me that, so I don't think I was ever going to be happy, you know, climbing that academic career path.
Hmm.
So instantly, knowing one of my reasons for doing science ruled out some stuff that would probably made me unhappy in the long run, despite the fact that I'm intellectually, cut out for it.
Hmm.
So what came next? Well, one thing that dissatisfied me was the pressure of doing research. So when the opportunities came up, I applied and got a lab tech job where I could still problem solve and help people out, and still mentor people, and still contribute just to research, but just not in a spearhead capacity. And I loved it, and if this job at Bitesize Bio hadn't come up, um, I'd still be doing that now. And the inspiration to do that came from some serious reflection on what I wasn't enjoying about a career path in academia, and trying to see what my future looked like within it. Was it self-limiting?
Yeah. Well, what you're describing here is someone who sought clarity, found it, then used that to make some choices about, well, where do I
Right.
go from here? Which segues in well to what I wanted to talk about next. So a lot of people, when they get to this juncture, that they realize they don't have clarity, and I just don't even know how to get it. If I don't know what I'm doing here. Why did I how did I end up in this place? And for different people, it's going to be different reasons. For some people, that it'll be immediately clear to them. I'm here because I'm passionate about this. I love biology. I love living things. I, I love keeping things alive. They that part stands out to them. Now, if you have that, awesome. But that's not always what it is. For some people, it's a step back from that. The 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 nuts and bolts of biology is interesting, but what they really want to do is see an application of that. They want to make an impact in the world. They want to change something. They want to fix something big. They want to cure cancer. I mean, that's a meme for solving a big problem in the world, right? Well, in in the world of biology, it's actually real. People actually do that. And maybe you're one of those people. Or maybe it's something else. And maybe it's not something that giantly broad, but it will make a big impact. You may help with something that will solve, you know, problems for thousands of people. And maybe it keeps them alive, maybe just makes their life more pleasant. And I say just, as if that isn't a big accomplishment. That kind of impact matters to a lot of people. And maybe that's one of the reasons why you're doing science. Now, for others, it could be something as simple of, it's a paycheck and it's a good paycheck. So, um, and I'm taking care of my family. There is nothing wrong with that as a motivation. It's just not gonna, it's probably not gonna win you a Nobel Prize, but but
Yeah.
you can show up for work every day, do your job, and get the paycheck, and that is a fine trade-off.
What you mentioned there, Ken, they kind of sound like, they're two extremes, but there's a lot in the middle ground. So,
Oh yeah.
for example, I could never work in retail because I'm just not a people's person. I'm not a misanthrope, but I'd fumble if I was at a checkout talking to people all day. So, for example, a sort of covert benefit that a science job can bring is, you are quite independent. You're left largely to your own devices. Okay, you have lab meetings and you have a supervisor, but your job is not public facing, and that was
Mhm.
something I relished,
Yeah.
in academia, even though there are broader, reasons why I didn't like it. And I think what being wise to those sort of covert benefits at least help you cope with setbacks, whether or not they're enough to make you stay long term or they impact your career choices. I don't know. That's a deeply personal thing.
Well, if you have if you get clear on which of these things really are positive triggers for you, if it really, really matters to you that you're going to make an impact in the world, and you have a job where you're going in every day, doing your job, you're working with decent people, you got good equipment, but it doesn't give you that fulfillment of having an impact, that's going to be a problem for you. If you're somebody that what you want is a good environment to work in, and I don't care if I'm solving a very small, very narrow problem that nobody else ever hears about, if that matters to you, great, go for that. If it's I just have to be working with zebrafish. I'm just all about that. Yeah. Okay, great. And maybe that looks a little odd to somebody from the outside, but who cares? You know, if that's what's driving you, great. And if it's like I'm here because this is a stable lab. It's got great management. It's got good programs for mentorship. You know, it's building a solid career for me. Awesome.
It,
That's completely fine.
impact is an interesting one as well. That's something I personally went back and forwards on. So, when I finished my master's, started my PhD, got my first postdoc, I relished the idea that I was doing pure research, um, contributing to the body of knowledge, or however you want to slice it up.
Mhm.
But then I started thinking, how much of this research is translational? Is it really making that much of a difference? Am I happy just putting it out there, that research, to be accessible by anyone who wishes to,
Yeah,
or
that's true. If you don't get a feedback on it, maybe you don't feel the impact.
that's right. So then I was thinking, well, would I be happier, working in a clinical research organization, for example, or in
Mhm.
industrial science, which seemed to me to be perhaps more efficient and more translational.
Right.
And I've never tried it. I've only imagined, imagine being in one, but I think you would sacrifice the creative freedom that you have to approach research problems that you get in academia. So
Mhm.
while it's perhaps less efficient, if you were to work for a clinical research organization, from what my friends say, they have a set of assays they do to screen for therapeutics, and you carry them out and you liaise with
Right.
chemists to optimize them, and they do the synthetic chemistry.
Mhm.
Whereas in a university, you can, within reason, you can bring in as many techniques and approaches as you want to solve problems. So you butt up against two other things there. One is, how much are you, how happy or how comfortable are you doing, commercial research versus, well, it's pro bono, for want of another word, whatever you do
Yeah.
in universities. And then also it butts up against creativity. So, you know, more commercial work seems to me less creative. Now it's up to the individual where one draws that line.
Sure.
but it's an interesting thing to ponder. I've nothing wrong with commercial work per se, and I always, now I see it as a more efficient engine to net, yeah, net change in the world. But it's of course picking out the organisations that you're comfortable with, the even the morality of, because it is for profit research at the
Mhm.
end of the day.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what you're talking about reminds me of what it was like in my career in computer science, when I was younger. At the beginning, I learned low level languages, which would be similar to basic research, assembly language, for instance.
Yeah,
But the problem is you write an assembly code and it does very esoteric things. Whereas I got much more interested in what are called applications. That is the software that humans touch. It's the stuff that regular people use. Because there I saw the impact. And for me personally, that's what I needed. Now, that was not to say that the people I knew that were assembly programmers weren't freaking brilliant,
hmm,
and
yeah,
they had to be because it was hard, you know.
right,
But I was far more satisfied doing what I was doing, and and I did not care if the super nerdy assembly programmers looked down on me for doing applications. Somebody needed to do it. It was important work, valuable work, and it was commercially valuable, which for me, again, checked the box.
yeah.
I wanted to make money.
And
So,
that's fair enough, right? It seems to be a bit of it's anathema to a lot of scientists. It's a bit of an evil to want to commercialize one's ideas. Now, it's a personal opinion. It's not right or wrong, but I see it as it's
you know what I
and
think is
it's
hilarious
default for
about
what.
that?
Go on.
I was going to say, I'm sorry to interrupt, but um, a lot of people in spiritual communities are very anti-money. They're like, wow, the woo spiritualists are on the same page with the hardcore scientists. Like, come on, folks.
I guess it's the ground between having research public available versus for profit. I'm not sure
Yeah.
they're quite the same. Um, but inevitably, commercial companies, they'll keep the research to themselves. Now, that
Mhm.
it's not necessarily the same as it being for profit, but those two things are rarely untied in the in the private sector, understandably so. Um,
Yeah, we're seeing more and more though of that model being broken. It used to be, everything was driven by greed and control. But like, you know, Tesla put out a bunch of their patents out into the world for free. I
yeah,
mean, really, really valuable patents out in the world for free.
that's a good
In
point.
a very narrow area. There's a special table saw, that's used by woodworkers,
Yeah,
where they developed a technology that causes the blade to stop if it touches flesh, and I mean stop immediately, to where instead of losing a finger, you get a scratch. They just put that technology out for free, and it was changing the whole world. I mean, there's all kinds of legislation going on to make regular table saws without this technology illegal,
yeah.
and so they just said, you know what, we're going to let our competitors use it. So,
Well, it'd be interesting if, for example, therapeutic development was much more like that.
mhm,
Um, but even in academia, people work in isolation. You have your competitor groups, right? So it's still
sure.
you still see the idea of
Well,
working in isolation rearing its head.
although I love the notion of the 100 monkeys. And perhaps you've
I'm not
heard this.
familiar with it.
Okay, well, there was a group of monkeys in Japan, where they would live near these hot springs, and these are an island, so they're isolated groups of monkeys, and a certain group of monkeys recognized that they could wash some of their food off in these springs, and
Oh yeah,
once
Nicodemus.
they taught each other in the group, but once they learned it, monkeys on other islands started to learn to do it. Just no contact. And we've seen that happen plenty in science, where somebody comes up with a eureka level discovery, and somebody on the other side of the world does too. And
Yeah.
perhaps there's contact between them, but often there wasn't. So it's going to get out there one way or the other. Sooner or later, we're going to break this model of just clutching everything to our own chest greedily, and realize, that it's going to get out one way or the other. So what you want to do is get in front of it.
Yeah.
And at any given moment, we don't, you don't have to be. the only one that knows how something works. You just have to be the one who knows just a little bit better than the next guy, the one who has an application when no one else has it. There's plenty of ways to be one step ahead of this without having to shut down the sharing of knowledge. So that kind of leads me to my next point. And that is your purpose. You know, sometimes we look at that word and go, "Oh, come on, really? I have to have a purpose about assays, really?" You know, um, but yeah, you kind of do, um, because a purpose gives you some guiding principles. It helps you determine how you're going to approach things. It helps you deal with challenges, and whether sometimes you have major challenges. Should I stay in this line of research at all? Should I, like what you were describing earlier, Tom, in your own personal career. And then there's minor challenges, just like, man, do I need to put up with this? Do I need to start mentoring somebody, or do I need to get them out of my lab? You know, um,
Yeah.
things like that. And then too, there's always setbacks, and setbacks could be technical. They could be, why are these experiments failing? I don't know what we're doing wrong. Or it could be the setback is, well, your funding just got cut to third, um, and you have to figure out a new way to solve whatever problems you're choosing to solve. Um,
Purpose is an interesting one as well, because when you think of it, one's mind tends to go straight towards something lofty, some sort of
right.
all-encompassing uh, philosophy. But you execute the small tasks with purpose as well.
Oh, absolutely.
So
Yeah, I mean, not
it's that.
everybody is that kind of, you know, contemplate your navel kind of person. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be to be efficient. Now, I will argue it'd be better to be optimized, but efficient is better than inefficient. And
Yeah,
sometimes that is what people's primary focus is, and that's perfectly fine.
I
It takes
think
all kinds.
I was once asked in a postdoc interview, one of the best qualities a researcher could have was, and that my answer at the time was, know what you can say of your data, and what you can't. I think that's what makes you a good scientist.
Mhm.
Now, with regards to purpose, I think that's because I like to execute tasks extremely well. Maybe I'm not a perfectionist, maybe I am. And this brings me to another point. Here in this job, I can be a perfectionist, do things well, and it's rewarded. Clients are happy. Whereas in academia, I'm not sure. It was more of a delay because of the nature of the work I was doing. I didn't, I couldn't labor over everything and execute it as well as I wanted to do and explore all the avenues to get my research done, because there was a time constraint on our research project.
Sure.
Which brings me to another point about why being clear on your reason matters. There's a saying that you get the politicians you deserve. Well, I also think it's true you get the jobs you deserve. And using
Sure.
myself as an example, I applied to so many postdoc jobs, even though earlier I said I didn't want to go down that career. Well, the reality is at the time I needed the money, and I got barely any interviews. And I think you know deep down the fact that I didn't want to go down this career path, it must have shone through or something,
Mhm.
because the amount of feedback I got back from writing interviews, sorry, and follow-ups was
Mhm.
so much higher. I just think it's uncanny, and it kind of pushes you down almost a fatalistic route where I got this job, so I'm happy with it now. But I don't think that's true. You tend to get the job you want, and if you're clear on what you want, you can target the jobs you apply for if you're at that crucial stage of your career.
Yeah, I mean, there's kind of a perpendicular thing going on here. You can use your purpose to help you reflect on your professional success, but that's kind of in the job you already have. Um, Purpose can also help you focus on the best career choices.
Hmm.
So, knowing that it's time to make a change is a really important thing, and purpose can help you be clear on that. And then once you know it's time to make a change, now choosing what to change to, very important that you make the best possible choices. So,
I, yeah, I couldn't agree more. And just to put some numbers to that, uh, the point you've just made and the point I made originally. I must have applied to 2 dozen postdoc jobs. Now I know they're hard to get. Whereas, I applied to 2 lab tech jobs, got the second one. I've applied to 1 writing job. Well, I didn't even apply to this one. I just got it because of my way in. So it's interesting. I mean, obviously you've got the function of time, my CV builds, and you've got how hard these individual jobs are to get. But nonetheless, I think if you're clear about the choice you want to make in your career, because you know why you do science or what it is you
Mhm.
want out of your job, it makes you so much more likely to execute that interview well, prepare for it well, and succeed.
Sure. So again, I want to flip to the dark side of this and think about the notion of dispassion. Maybe you've gotten to a point where I just don't have that fire in my belly, and it's just not there. And maybe it's gone. Maybe it was there and now it's not there. Maybe it never was there. And this people worry about that because they think in the moment of I'm just a poster boy for dispassion. I must be I must be in the wrong thing. I should just get out of this entirely. But it doesn't have to be like that. It could be that first off, maybe it's just a phase. It's been hard lately. You struggled with some problems that once they're solved won't be there anymore. Well, then you can take another look at things. Now it's not a matter of dispassion. It's a matter of I wasn't going to get worked up about stuff that was just temporary. Um, that's one possibility of dispassion.
Yeah, no, I agree. Sorry, Ken, can I just jump in there just to
Yeah.
invite our audience members to ask some questions? And I do want to follow up on your point. So, if
Okay.
there's anyone in the audience who wants to ask anything, yeah, I'll put them to Ken, or I'll try and answer them if you've got anything. So feel free to post questions. But yeah, just on that, Ken, I think if you're vague on your reasons why you do science or you're dispassionate, it can actually blind you to things you might not be enjoying, or at the very least, make you more acquiescent. And I think that's important because a lot of the scientists I've met, and I include myself in this, um, we don't like change. We're introverts. We're kind of demure. We're not sort of tend to be risk averse anyway, which is more of a barrier to affecting change in one's personal life or professional life. So I think you have to weigh that against it as well. And if like you say, it might just be a phase, but if it's not, try and I don't know, recognize that sometimes it is good to take some risks.
Not only good, it's necessary. The
Mm,
fact is, life is change. It's how you know when you're looking at that petri dish. If it's not moving, it's probably dead. Uh,
yeah,
it's got to be changing. There's got to be something happening.
sure. Yeah, well, I was when I changed jobs, because it's probably well, it wasn't easier to stay in academia when it came to getting postdocs, but decided to going through that process of interviewing for loads and not getting them. I was unemployed for such a long time, and I wonder if I'd been aware of things earlier. Could I've gone through that phase of my life a bit more efficiently? That's all shoulda, woulda, coulda. And here I am now, and things are hunky dory. That's kind of the point. If you can realize that, you can maybe avoid these periods where you don't waste time because you always learn something. Obviously, all the experiences are valuable, but in
Mhm.
retrospect, I probably wouldn't have bothered applying for so many postdoc jobs because why? I didn't want them. Should have gone straight for something else.
Yeah. Well, sometimes we have to do that because we feel like we have to pay our dues.
Sure.
Like I got to go through the motions at least. I got to act like I care.
Yeah, well, that goes back to what I was saying earlier, that I was always quite a dispassionate researcher, and
Mhm.
that gets mistaken a lot for not caring, which is not true because
Oh, not at all.
I was really good at what I did, but there's a culture of having to show that you're emotionally invested, like 100% of the time, round the clock, and I think it's an open secret, that culture. But going home and forget about it and getting on with your life, going away rock climbing or whatever for the weekend and not being in the
Sure.
lab, that sort of forgetting about what you do refreshes you for the next week. It's an obvious point when you say it, but I'm not sure how many people I met who lived it, even though I think they'd be the first to agree with me.
Well, it's a commitment to live that, you know.
Yeah,
So a lot of folks are like, I'm already overcommitted. I can't also join the rock climbing gym. Yeah, I can't do it.
true. That's true. That is true. Yeah, no, it's yeah. I've not thought about it that way.
Yeah. But there's one final point I want to make about this notion of dispassion. maybe in your case, it is a sign that you need to do something different, that you are somehow misaligned with what you really want from life. Now, don't let that scare you. Like, oh no, you mean I'm going to quit being a biologist and I'm going to have to go become a waiter? You're like, no, you won't. It's not like that. I mean, unless you really want to become a waiter, right? But chances are, once you recognize and are willing to say, I'm misaligned. This is what I'm doing right now is not making me happy. It's not fulfilling me. It's not satisfying me. It's not taking me forward. Well, then you can start asking questions. Well, what would? What might solve this? And it could be sometimes as simple as I just need to work in a different lab. I need a different role in the lab. I actually want to go back to university. I want to work on another postdoc. Whatever. It can then shine a light on what's possible. So dispassion isn't necessarily a sign that something is wrong. But it can often be a sign that it's time to do something different. And fine. And who knows what'll happen? Who knows what new opportunities will wander across your field of vision because now your eyes are open. And that's if we feel trapped in something, that's never a good feeling. But if you feel like you have possibilities, then who knows? Who knows what will happen next?
Uh,
So,
Sorry, Ken, I would add to that,
mhm,
spend time reflecting on what makes you sad or happy or motivated or burnt out at work.
mhm,
It's a reflection exercise. And then try and think about the other skills you have that need to be integrated with your science skill set in your ideal job, and then imagine yourself in it. So, for example, what bummed me out about working in academia that maybe not want to get up and do science was institutes were too institutional. I like science, I like empirical work, but I couldn't work with solely other scientists all day every day because I felt it undermining my other interests. Whereas this job, for example, and working as a lab tech wasn't like that. I got to work with and do get to work with people with different skill sets. I work with podcast producers, for example. I work with the CEO of a company who's no longer a scientist. Who, I don't know, just got different experiences that personally enrich me. But some people they love science to the point where that they're happy being completely immersed in it, and
yeah.
that's probably a good sign that the academic route is good for you.
Absolutely. And we need people like that. If you're
Well,
one of
yeah,
those people, keep going. You're doing great.
I know. I always worry I don't bring enough balance to these discussions because we ought to have we ought to have an academic in as well. For a balance of a balance of opinions. It's not purely negative. I'm just giving my personal experiences. It's not a better or worse thing.
Mhm.
It's about what motivates you. Um,
Yeah, well, I tend to present a contrarian view on purpose because you know a lot of the the audience here, they are immersed in science. They are surrounded by scientists. I'm trying to give them a voice from the wilderness, as it were. There are some other ways to think about this. Because if all you see is people that are nose to the grindstone and just ride and die, yeah,
yeah,
you know, you may not realize there are other possibilities, and they don't necessarily, and they often don't require you to change. I mean, to make a massive change. You don't have to get out of science. We want you to stay in science. We need people that are science adjacent, also, just like we need people that are engaged at the lab.
yeah. I couldn't agree more. It's a wholesome note on which I think you'll wrap this up.
Yeah. All right. Well, that wraps up what I wanted to cover today. Is there anything else we want to talk about, Tom?
No, I'm just looking down my notes. I think I've covered everything. There's no questions from our audience. If anybody wants to chime in, they can. If there's anything you feel we've not covered, no, I've covered the main points I wanted to cover. Just flip things on their head. Ask, what else would you be doing? What would make you happy? And speak to people
Sure.
who do your
Even if
ideal
you're not
job.
going to do it, it's just what if in 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 a different universe, what would I do?
Exactly, and then speak to people who do it in reality, and see
Yeah.
would you be happy in their shoes? That's a good that's a good starting
Yeah,
point.
that's a good point. sometimes we get fantasies about things. So wouldn't it be great if I just did this? And it's I think people that have started restaurants have thought that. Wouldn't it be great to just cook all day? Yeah, until you cook all day, you find
Right.
out
Yeah,
it's not the
exactly. And
same.
if it was a choice between being a restaurateur or going back to academia, I'm straight back in the labs because I could not run a restaurant. There's too much conflict in that for me. Yeah, thanks for our time today. And if you enjoyed the content, please subscribe to The Happy Scientist on your favorite podcast platform or on YouTube. You can listen back to earlier episodes, which are packed with equally useful wisdom. And of course, tell your colleagues so we can help spread The Happy Scientist. Also, look out for more live Happy Scientist episodes in the coming months. You can find them listed on events.bitesizebio.com, the Happy Scientist Facebook page at www.facebook.com/The Happy Scientist. Until then, good luck in your research and goodbye from all of us at Bitesize Bio, including Mr. Miyagi.
Bye.
Bye.
The Happy Scientist is brought to you by Bitesize Bio, your mentor in the lab. Bitesize Bio features thousands of articles and webinars contributed by hundreds of PhD scientists and scientific companies who freely offer their hard-won wisdom and solutions to the Bitesize Bio community.